So this will be kind of a somewhat informal meeting this time. We will have a group discussion about everyone's favorite hot topic, which is the commission lawsuits and everything related to that. So I know Doug and Lori and Marcio were in the company meeting last week. I'm not gonna say it this time. One of us in this room got kicked out of the company meeting last week, but through no fault of her own. So yeah, we're gonna talk about kind of briefly the background, and it's gonna be covering a lot of the same topics we talked about in the company meeting last week, but I think this is an important enough topic that it deserves a few separate discussions and ongoing discussions, and of course, this is kind of an unfolding story, so we don't have all the answers yet. We're kind of gonna figure some of it out as we go along as an industry. So, but it's really important to kind of stay on top of all of it. For you new people, you know, this will be much easier probably than for people that have been in the business for a long time. Well, we've been used to this old way of doing things for years, if not decades. So, all right, so again, this will be kind of a group discussion, so I want you guys to ask questions and give your thoughts and opinions. But again, I have to give the disclaimer, I don't have all the answers. Lori and Jill don't have all the answers. Our industry doesn't have all the answers, so we will do our best, just based on what we know at this point. So the most recent development, which was a big one, March 15th, so NAR entered into a settlement, a proposed settlement at this point. It hasn't been approved yet, but a settlement wherein they pay, I think it was $400 and some million in damages in this class action lawsuit from last year. And also make a bunch of changes, industry-wide changes, to make sure this doesn't happen again. Of course, you guys all know the kind of the basis for the lawsuit, right? Is there anyone unclear on what the whole basis of this was? Y'all good on that?
Yep.
Okay. So what we're gonna go over is basically the proposed changes, which are expected to be approved by the judge in the case. I think Lori and Jill said next month, which is almost here now, April, is when it's expected to be approved. So here's the changes. And you can kind of follow along here. This is going to affect everyone in our industry who is a realtor. And of course, there's a difference between realtor and real estate agent. We all know that, right? But I think I read statistically 90% of real estate agents are realtors. Like, it's a huge percentage. So obviously everyone here is a realtor. Our MLS is owned, or not owned by, but under the control of NAR. So yes, this affects all of us. All right, so number one, we're on page 2. And I apologize, I thought I was printing in color. I got a fancy full color version. You peons get the grayscale, but hopefully you can still read through it. Buyer representation agreement, and I apologize on Zoom. I was gonna send Sam the agenda to send to everybody, and my laptop, which I thought was fully charged, died seconds after I hit print on this, so.
Literally seconds.
Literally seconds, yeah, so I didn't have access to send it, but we will send it out later on once I have a cord for my laptop again. All right, so number one, buyer representation agreements are going to be required for all realtors. Now, obviously, Keller Williams Capital Partners, we've been very proactive about this, which is one of the things I love about our company. We're not waiting for all this to happen. If we see something changing, we're going to get on board with it right away. We're not going to wait for it to be a requirement, right? That's going to make it much harder to adapt. So we've been requiring these, well, they've been required since March 1st, but we've been using these since December, January.
Yeah.
I don't remember when we started, but
Yeah, December.
Which is nice to have it in place
Mhm.
for this case.
Right.
You know, you're not
Right.
running out to
I
your
feel like-
client going, oh, new lawsuit coming
Yeah.
here, now you gotta sign this.
I feel like a lot of companies, though, probably are waiting until July 1st to implement these things, so. But it's a great idea to use these anyway, and they will be required industry-wide very soon. They already are required at Keller Williams Capital Partners as of March 1st. So, the difference between the requirement we've had here since March 1st and this new national requirement through NAR is that you need to have that signed before even showing a house that's listed in the MLS. So we didn't have that requirement here. Obviously, that's going to be a requirement for both us and nationally. So get in the habit of doing that buyer consultation where you're doing this buyer representation agreement, your whole presentation, before you start showing homes. Because as recently as I think with you, I think just a couple weeks ago, I said, go ahead and, show the home, set up your buyer consultation afterwards. I think we said that, didn't we?
Well, no, you had me just bring them on in.
Okay.
He went to my open house.
Maybe it wasn't you then, but I know recently I've said that to someone, go ahead and show the house. The buyer wanted to see a house. Who was that then? Buyer wanted to see a house. I didn't have time to help the agent prepare, the buyer consultation. So I'm like, go ahead and show it and we'll do that afterwards. But going forward, at least starting July 1st, that's gonna need to be done before any showing of an MLS listing.
This is such a technical question, but you said new agents, we encourage them to do showings like with their family and stuff.
Mhm.
What,
Oh, that's a good question, Sam. Yeah, so new agents, actually, I don't know, Chelsea, if you've started your next steps checklist, but one of the things on there, and we talked about it the other day, is as a new agent, it's a good idea to, just get yourself out there and even do a couple practice showings. So this is probably really just applying to you more than anyone else here, but, so I'll just look at you.
to-do list.
But no, so Sam's question is if you're doing these, practice showings, taking Bobby with you to show a house, just to kind of get used to doing it, do you need to have a buyer representation agreement?
Or can they just do agent preview?
I would say in that situation, no, and the reason is because like, if you were buying a house, Sam,
Mhm.
you would not have to sign a buyer representation agreement because you are the buyer and the agent.
Okay.
Right, so I don't believe that you would need any buyer representation agreement in that scenario.
Okay,
So because of that, I would say you also don't need it for a practice showing.
okay.
It'll be very interesting what comes back from the attorneys or whatever, the guidance around people, especially agents that work the internet leads. And you're walking in, so you don't meet the client and then you, until you go to show the property.
Right,
But
right.
before it was just the consumer guide, you had to have them
Mhm.
either acknowledge that they refused to sign it or signed it. But now we have to do this other
Yeah.
document. So there was some dialogue around, do they just have one day showing kind of buyer
Yeah.
agreement?
Mhm.
So.
Well, and that's one of the things that I don't have the answer to that yet.
Right.
That's actually one of the things that I don't want to use the word concern because there are a lot of agents in our business that are freaking out about this, and there's no reason for that. There's no reason for that whatsoever, but there are a few things that I don't even want to say you should be worried about. That's not something to worry about, but this is something that I feel like could be a kind of a thing we have to figure out and work a solution for, because yes, there are going to be, internet leads. A lot of times an internet lead reaches out on multiple properties and that goes to multiple different agents. So if each one of these agents is having them sign a buyer representation agreement, how's that gonna play out? Is it first one that gets them to sign one, locks them in? A 1 day.
Or is it just on that
agreement-
property that I'm?
Well,
showing it?
so that makes sense, but then, if I'm a agent showing a house, why wouldn't I just go ahead and, if I'm going to the trouble of getting a buyer representation agreement signed,
Yeah,
why wouldn't I just go ahead and make it for a
Yeah.
year,
yeah.
for any property, like,
But then we
Right.
have our counterparts who may or may not disclose that you just signed this to the
Well,
consumer for a year.
and that's something that I'm having a hard time like processing, so
Mhm.
buyers, most of the time, don't even know what they've signed. Or
Right,
you say, can you show me what you signed with this other agent? Well, I don't know where that stuff is, and
Maybe
you know,
they did.
we've already dealt with that even before this new rule.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how that's gonna play out. That's kind of a TBD
Right.
topic, I would say.
On the positive side of it, what a great way to help sort of vet the validity of a client inquiry that wants
Yeah.
to see a property. I mean, also on the positive end, it's how serious of a buyer are you? Because you could spend countless
Yeah,
hours
yeah.
and days prior to this
Mhm.
showing a property.
Yeah.
And then go with somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a client, picked them up at a open house, and I spent probably 2 months with them, and they had no intention of ever buying, so.
Yeah.
So
May
sometimes.
have forced the hand to
Yeah.
sign something, may have changed that
No,
relationship.
I think Lori, I think you're right. I think that will kind of weed out the tire kickers and
The
narrow it
WikiLeaks.
down to the serious buyers.
Yeah.
I think that is a good side effect.
Cause it's gonna come from everyone they call.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone is gonna
Oh,
be
yeah.
like, well, you have to sign
Sure.
something.
For sure.
Right,
It's
it should.
98%.
At least by, what, July, they're gonna.
Yeah.
Right.
Start or.
Now, as we know, not everyone plays by the rules.
That's true, that's.
So I
How's it
think-
gonna be policed?
I think, you know, especially with internet leads, which can be pretty flaky to start with. I
Mhm.
think, you know, they may contact multiple agents. Agent 1, 2, and 3, I'll say you gotta sign this buyer representation agreement. Agent 4 doesn't play by the rules. They're like,
Right.
no, we won't worry about that. And they'll go ahead and show the homes. And no, I think that's going to happen too, but.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a small percentage that in the overarching
Real.
scheme of things, how great of an impact will that really have if it's, 0.2%?
mm,
Right. And I will tell you, I did normally every Monday through Friday, I get on, Recon with Danny, I forgot his last name, Danny, but he's from Bold. I don't know if you've been to Bold or not, but
Nobody
he's a
here's
coach.
the bold, so you're the one.
No, I'm the only one?
Yeah,
Okay,
So far.
so he's a coach and, we do recon where we do role play. And I'll give y'all guys that information if you want it,
Yeah.
but they're always talking about at the end, closing the sale, but, or on the phone call, getting that appointment set.
Yeah,
And that's been embedded in me so much that, I'm almost like ready for this to happen.
Yeah.
yeah.
So that I can get appointments in front of people
Mhm.
and show my value and be like,
Mhm.
you want me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You don't want to deal with another agent, right? Like, that's the mentality we have to have.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
It's like, you want me, I know my stuff, and we're gonna get you a house.
Mhm.
Now, then we'll find out they're really serious,
Yeah.
right? So,
Right.
but most people who've never bought a home, they will go with you.
Mhm.
Because I know I've sat down with people with no showing all my value, and they're like, okay, I'll use you.
Yeah.
Cause that's all they know.
Well, that's the nice thing about first time buyers. Yeah, they don't know,
They don't
know,
have that.
they don't have an expectation for that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Right,
You're gonna have a bigger challenge with someone that's been through the process before,
Mhm.
like, I never had to sign one of those, but
Yes.
you do.
but they'll probably never be like, wow, you're having me sign something? Okay, cause at that point, you're showing your value, like, wow, you're better than the person who helped me buy this house, that they're not using that same
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, showing your value is gonna be obviously the key in all these situations going forward, and we've spent a lot of time as a company over the last several months, kind of like alongside, you know, the buyer representation agreement, training. We've had multiple classes here on proving your value.
Mhm.
Which is kind of a tricky subject because, you know, your value is gonna be different than your value and my value. It's not like a boilerplate, you know,
Mhm.
here's a list of things that are your value. You have to really kind of put some thought into it, but I did leave you something. I don't know if you've been to the other office yet on the desk
No, I
there,
haven't.
because we talked about that the other day.
Okay.
But anyway, so yeah, that's a whole different conversation, but yes, proving your value is going to be extremely important going forward.
Mhm.
I think that's why a lot of agents are freaking out. Maybe because they don't feel like they have the value, maybe they aren't that great of agents and maybe they don't have a lot of value.
Mhm.
And now suddenly they have to, you know, kick it into gear and show value.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they're freaking out. I don't know, but
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends yesterday. Him and his wife came over and they bought a house in Roundsburg like 5 years ago. And he used like somebody that he went to church with when he was a kid. He was a realtor. And he was like, yeah, and they're having a baby, so they want to get something bigger eventually. So he was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to use him again. He wasn't, you know, anything special.
okay, yeah.
So he was like, I'll probably just use you because we're a lot
Okay.
closer and I just feel like you know, like you're willing to learn something
That's
if you
great.
don't know it. So, you know, even though people have used agents in the past,
Yeah.
if they didn't show the value,
Yeah.
like, I mean, did they do this for you? Did they do that?
There's actually a statistic, and I can't think what the percentage is, but the percentage of sellers who list their home with the agent who represented them when they were a buyer is really low.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because even if they had a good experience, the agent didn't keep in touch with them, hasn't reached out since the closing. That's pretty common. So, that's a whole separate conversation too, but
Yeah.
but no, I think there's a lot of cases where a seller is not going to use the same agent again.
Yeah.
All right, so, the buyer representation agreement, so back to these, so we're pretty well set on these items, but basically there are three things that have to be in every buyer representation agreement. You have to disclose the rate of compensation you're going to receive.
Mhm.
So that can't be just a blank field. Our company policy is that needs to be at least 3%. So some people have said, well, isn't it like, a violation of antitrust laws to have a set commission? Isn't that like what the whole issue was in the first place? And as Lori Molnar explained it very well, no, we're allowed to have a company policy on that sort of thing. We can't, coordinate with Remax and Coldwell Banker, we're all gonna do 3%. That would be bad. But we can certainly have a company policy, and that is, it should say 3% at least.
Mhm.
And that's really important because I think it's maybe the next one. No,
I think it's fair to say, my company's fee is
Yes.
3%.
Yes.
So then it's not just, I made up some random,
right.
Yeah.
is that like, which kind of, I think when you, that would give it a little bit more weight to say,
Right.
my company's fee is 3%, and just
Mhm.
keep going, move
And
on.
I like that you said fee instead of commission.
Yeah.
Somehow that sounds better. I don't even know why, it just does.
It sounds less salesman.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I think saying a 3% fee and then going into your value, what you're gonna provide for that fee, I think that's the way to go. So number two, it can't say whatever's offered by the seller. I mean, that would be a tempting thing to do, but it has to be a fixed dollar amount or percentage. And then number three is real important. So Doug, we'd had the conversation about you potentially doing a lower amount for your investors.
Mhm.
Number three is why you never want to do that, because if your buyer brokerage agreement says, let's say 2%, for example, and you show them a house and the seller is offering a 3% commission, you cannot get a 3% commission.
No.
You're going to get 2%.
Mhm.
Even if the seller was willing to give 3%, you've
Mhm.
just lost,
Right.
a third of your
But
commission.
what's nice is though, if you go in, it is discretionary to go down if you want to.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you're working with a client and
Yes.
that other, you find out it's only 2% and they're struggling to close, you can, and you have an agreement with 3,
Mhm.
you can opt to take the 2%.
Yes, very good point. You can always
Oh, yeah.
negotiate down, you can't negotiate up.
Now, with that 3%, it is true though. If they offer 3, they still have to give 3, but the brokerage will then give that 1% to our client.
You can make that arrangement. That would not be an automatic thing.
Mhm.
That would have to be negotiated. That wouldn't be automatic.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
because it can't be, what is it? Something about a buyback?
I mean, it would have to be disclosed in the purchase contract. That's an incentive to the buyer. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, those are perfectly legal, but that would have to be negotiated though, for sure.
I'm not saying that we should do that.
No, but
But-
there are gonna be occasions where you might do that.
Right.
For sure. So are we good on the buyer representation agreements? I know we haven't done that training yet, obviously, but, I'll probably recommend for you, Chelsea, go back and, has Sam gotten you the link to the YouTube channels?
Yes.
Channel, the
Yep.
different videos? There are two, it was like January 4th and January 11th.
Okay.
The first one, we went over line by line the buyer representation agreement.
Okay.
The second, the next meeting, the next week, we did a kind of a walkthrough of buyer consultation, and Lori did a lot of that because she was our first agent to
Good.
do
Yeah,
one
I
of
think
these
it
newfangled buyer consultations. So
Mhm.
I'm probably gonna have you start with those two and
Okay.
then, talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
And we can kind of help prep you for your first buyer consultation, but. So everyone good on the buyer representation agreements.
Not sure. So Lori made a note, Molnar,
Mhm.
in one of the big, DR Horton right now is offering all those incentives.
Yes, that's
10,000,
right, yes,
5,000.
yes.
And right now, because of our agreement, if it were after July 15th, we would not be able to take those.
Mhm.
But she said, even in the past, one of the things that she does is give that back to
Mhm.
the buyers
Mhm.
as a gift
Yeah.
or something. So
Yeah,
thought that
and I
was
think that's a
interesting.
good practice too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, since the buyer representation agreement can't be open-ended, you couldn't put an additional term that says, you know, if you buy a new build and if they offer an incentive, like, that's open-ended.
Right.
So unfortunately, that's not gonna be able to go into the representation.
And it'll be interesting to see how DR Horton deals with that.
Oh, yeah, I think, you know, a big part of this is going to be kind of a ripple effect things, and that's gonna possibly be one.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, this is for now just affecting pretty much us, but then it's going to kind of ripple out from there, and it's going to affect builders, and I think, internet leads are probably gonna suffer
Yeah.
greatly from this.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of other effects before too long.
Rick,
Yes,
hi, it's Nancy.
Nancy, thanks for joining on Zoom.
Yes, quick question. I missed what, the whole thing regarding the bonus that the builders have.
Yes.
Are you saying that we cannot put it in the contract?
When you say the contract, you mean the buyer representation agreement?
Yeah, like so even if we put it at the bottom in the transaction, like on the note, saying, you know, if a builder is offering,
Mhm.
you know, an incentive,
Mhm.
then that should apply, like, so we
Well,
can't do that at all?
So Nancy, I think maybe you joined after I went over this part, but the amount of compensation in the buyer representation agreement has to be a fixed amount, a fixed percentage or a fixed dollar amount, can't be open-ended. So, I know you don't have a copy of the agenda, we'll send that out afterwards, but the one we went over just a few minutes ago, I'll read it to you. It says the amount of compensation must be set in the agreement, such as a percentage or dollar amount, and cannot be open-ended. For example, the agreement cannot say buyer broker compensation shall be whatever amount the seller is offering. So, so the language you just proposed would be almost exactly what they're saying you can't do.
Okay,
So yeah, unfortunately, you know, it doesn't sound like that's going to be an option. So I'm thinking maybe the builders will change the way they do bonuses. Maybe they'll just offer a higher percentage. Again, that's something we don't know how that's going to play out yet.
So then if they offer a higher percentage and you still have 3%.
Well, right.
Then.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, it'll go back
Yeah.
to.
yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
but you
so-
could still, you can actually change your buyer contract. You can adjust it if you have to.
Yeah, I think that, I haven't seen anything that says you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like if they start out looking at existing homes and you got 3% in there, I haven't seen anything that says you can't go back and do a new agreement that says, you know, whatever the builder's offering, not that wording, you can't say whatever the builder's
Right.
offering, but you can
Yeah.
say $10,000 bonus or whatever it is.
Yeah, because I remember Lori Monar has said that we start our buyer contract at 3%, and if later we had to adjust it, then we adjust it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's why we could.
yeah, we were just talking about that too. So yeah, you can always negotiate down,
Uh-huh.
never go up though.
Oh, that's what I was just thinking.
Well, you could go up if you had a new agreement,
Right.
Okay, okay,
but without a new agreement, you can go up.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, as long as you have a new one,
yes.
starting over.
And
I'm
again,
just thinking of how you would present that to your buyer. Hey, I need a new
Yeah.
agreement because there's
Yeah.
more money on the
Yeah,
table.
that
for
could
me.
be a little
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah.
But they know no
Maybe,
different.
maybe somehow you slip that in, at the initial concept, there might be a time we have to change this if
Yeah.
there's a bonus for something.
I
I don't
think,
know.
I think if you do it that way,
Maybe-
it's less awkward.
Yeah.
If you go, if you talk about it beforehand,
Right,
it
exactly.
would definitely be less awkward.
Or,
Yeah,
that's very
yeah.
true. That's
Yeah.
very true.
Or do you have an agreement that says if we do new builds or existing homes?
Yeah, you
Two
could have to put
different-
two
contract.
I don't know if you can have them both at the same time,
Running at
because
the same time.
they would,
Right.
you know,
X each
terms would
other out.
terms would
Yeah.
clash with each
Mhm.
other, so you'd probably have to avoid one to do the other one, but again, I just want to remind you guys, you know, we can talk through all these scenarios, we can come up with our brilliant solutions
Yeah.
in this room, but at the end of the
We're
day,
not gonna know
Until
until it
July
happens.
15th,
at the
yeah.
end of the day, the industry is what's going to be the final say on this,
Mhm.
So
so.
July 15th or is it July 1st?
15.
It said 15th in the thing, a lot of this came from, Gary Keller, and it said the 15th. But yeah, Lori and Jill said July 1st.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I think the NAR, or whatever's going on, they said sometime in the middle of July.
think.
So everyone's just assuming the 15th, but of course.
I mean, really, none of this is carved in stone yet because the
Right.
settlement hasn't been
It
approved.
doesn't, you know.
So really, you know, the rug could get pulled out from under this and none of this could get approved, but
Mhm.
the experts, attorneys, whoever is the experts in this field, all feel like this is going to be approved.
Right,
That's the expectation.
If it's not approved,
it
then.
could be worse.
Well, if it's not
Approved,
approved, then, you know,
until-
there would probably be new terms proposed
Mm-hmm.
and we go back through the process again, but
Well, hopefully it's just.
I don't
I
think,
know.
I don't think it would be out in front of us like this if it wasn't
Right.
basically a sure thing.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of people freaking.
There are.
I gotta stop looking at social media.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like, even in some of, like the moms
I
and real
mean,
estate group,
It's
they're.
starting to kind of take me down.
Like, they're like, should I
Like, I was
even
like,
do this
what am I
anymore?
doing?
No,
What am I doing right now? Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people who are just trolls.
Yeah.
Who want you. to
Yeah,
do it.
there are, and they all post anonymous. Oh,
Oh, yeah, I was the anonymous ones.
Yeah, it was like and I was just, and I made a comment saying, you know, oh, great, another anonymous person, and they deleted my post. They wouldn't let me post it. I'm like, I was like, oh, no, I said something about like somebody being, you know, it just, I was getting aggravated, because every time it was an idiotic post, it was always somebody who was anonymous, so.
Right.
So that actually brings me to another point, totally side note from what's on our agenda, but something you just said. Be sure you guys are not posting things
Mhm.
about commissions
Mhm.
on social media, whether it's your own
There
or
are so
whether
many
it's.
people that are still talking.
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
like, isn't this why this is
Right,
happening in the
right,
first
Right,
place?
so don't
Yeah.
discuss commissions outside of this office.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless it's with a client, obviously, but.
And even our strategies.
Yeah, because they search the internet.
Oh, yeah.
They search the internet, they search those groups, I mean, they can see,
Oh, yeah.
and, you know,
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be in that.
yeah,
Y'all go do that over there, keep doing it so I can just be the last one standing.
yeah, what Lori and Jill said was a lot of the evidence in this case that was basically used against NAR
Social media.
was straight from
They're public
agents,
Facebook
agents posting on social media.
Really?
Yeah.
Groups.
Yeah, that was a lot of the evidence in the trial.
Yes, it's public like knowledge.
Yeah, so they're just blatantly out there talking about 3% commissions.
The problem is you can't fix stupid.
No, that's very true. Yeah, no, very true.
You've still
But they're
got
still
these
talking
like
about it,
posting how-
like-
Oh, yeah, no, they,
You can
to this
just let
day,
it
right?
in,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
they're
I'm sure, I
just
can
like,
pull up the group right
gosh.
now and find
Yeah.
5 posts
Yeah.
of people talking about it.
All right, so let's get back on track here. We gotta cover this next section. So here's something that I don't think we saw coming. I didn't hear anything about this until just last week. So
Mhm.
obviously now, if you go on the MLS, maybe Chelsea, you don't know this yet, but if you go on the MLS and you pull up a listing, there's a field down at the bottom and it says, you know, what commission is being offered by the seller to the buyer broker.
Yeah.
And up until just very recently, our MLS, along with every other NAR controlled MLS, had a requirement that there had to be something offered for it to even go in the MLS. Like you couldn't put a 0 in there up until very recently. And that was a result of the
Which is
pending lawsuit at that time. So we knew that going forward, there could potentially be listings in the MLS offering no commission, which is why we started the buyer representation agreements.
Mhm.
What we didn't see coming, at least I didn't see this coming, was that as a result of this settlement, the MLS won't even have the field that shows a commission. So it's literally not going to show, and I don't know if that's going to go away before July or if they're gonna do that sooner, but.
I think it's July. I think that they're like officially,
I mean,
so
that's
as
the
of right now,
deadline.
but I'm sure people are gonna like start,
Mhm.
you know, not, but
This is the only one I feel like could make it
That-
not
that's-
stick.
that's
Well,
the
I
one,
think it's gonna stick.
that's the one that
I
I was
hope it
most
doesn't.
upset about was that, because I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm on to this buyer's representation, we're good with that, I get it now. But then they came out like, I just did a buyer's presentation and I'm sitting there like, but I've got your back, you know, we can see the commissions, you know what I mean, you know?
Yeah,
But,
so
no, I don't got your back.
we're going to work around all of this though. So here's the rules, regarding that. So, for you guys on Zoom, since you don't have this, I'll go ahead and just read this paragraph. Agents cannot make offers of cooperative compensation on the MLS. That's at all. MLSs must eliminate all broker compensation fields, and prohibit the sharing of offers of cooperative compensation in any other MLS field. So you can't put it in your, property description, you can't put it in the agent-to-agent remarks, that's still prohibited.
Mhm.
Let's see, NAR and any other MLSs released under the settlement also cannot create or support any non-MLS mechanism such as internet aggregator, I'll define that for you in a second. For sellers or listing agents to make offers of cooperative compensation to buyers agents. So basically, there can't be another site that's linked to the MLS where it's got the, right.
Like,
So when we first heard about this, a couple weeks ago, my expectation was maybe we could use showing time as our workaround. You go to set up a showing and right there in your showing instructions, it says, 3% compensation to buyer broker. That seemed like a nice, easy workaround, but that's not gonna happen. The reason is because that is what's considered a internet aggregator's website. So it's connected to the MLS, it's feeding from our MLS, so that's prohibited. So that's not gonna be the workaround. So this is one of those kind of TBD situations. How are we going to find out if there is compensation offered? And I think I would even guess in the majority of cases, there is still going to be compensation offered.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah,
For sure.
So I think a good listing agent is still going to explain to a seller, yes, you don't have to do this. This is negotiable. Got to make that clear, of course.
right,
But then you're going to follow up and you're going to say, but here is why that I recommend you do it. And you're going to explain the additional exposure and the other benefits of doing it. Yes.
What's gonna be interesting,
Getting more buyers in, potentially getting the multiple offer situations, yes.
what I think is during the beginning part, you're gonna see that just switch over to 3% and just business as usual.
Mhm.
But I think as people get more savvy or the consumer gets more savvy, it's going to be, all right, they're gonna offer compensation, but it depends on what kind of offer you give me. You give me a full price and you'll get the 3%, but we're gonna reserve it to see the offers and then decide
Yeah.
what we're going to give back. It might be 1% if it comes in a little more
Yep.
to what they.
Well, let me ask you, no, hold on, because I don't know if that's necessarily true though, because when you do the contract, you put in the amount in there,
Well, so that's our next topic.
no?
Yes, that's our next topic.
Okay.
So, for now, again, this is a TBD, we're gonna figure this out, but, at this point, it looks like what you're probably gonna have to do to find out if there's compensation offered is probably pick up the phone and call the agent, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think,
Text message.
the text is fine too, but I
But
think,
it's nice to
now you do want to get it in writing at some
You
point.
want to
yes.
get it in writing.
So I think, if it was me, I'd probably start with a call. Unfortunately, not every listing agent answers their phone, as we know, but
yeah.
start with a call, follow up, once you find out if there's compensation, follow up with a confirmation text or maybe an email would be better, but we're gonna figure that part out, but that's, at this point, probably how we will have to find out is literally have some sort of conversation with the listing agent.
Which is a good thing to have with the listing agent, not only to find out about the compensation, but what does the seller want? What's important to the seller?
Yeah, no,
Is it the price?
I always
or is
recommend
it-
having a conversation anyway.
Yeah,
Like a lot of agents skip that step, but I think having a conversation with the listing agent
Mhm.
is important. Yeah, what's important to the seller? Anything else I should know besides what's in the MLS? Do you have any other offers, anything else you're working on? Have all those conversations. And you can just ask about compensation as part of the conversation you should be having anyways, yeah, right? So, but we'll figure that out. I'm not worried about that part at all. All right, so here's a couple things that are different now. So I highlighted this, number 2. I'm gonna read it for you guys on Zoom. Sellers can offer concessions to the buyer in a public comment field in an MLS listing if the concessions are not conditional on paying the buyer's agent commission. So for example, you can put in your public property description, seller will pay 3% towards buyer's closing costs, something like that. The wording will probably be tweaked, but something to that effect. Which is probably going to be kind of code for, there's a compensation offered. You can't say that. So then it goes on and says, however, as part of the negotiations of the purchase contract, sellers and buyers can agree to apply the concessions to the buyer's agent's commission. So
That's awesome.
so the description is going to be maybe kind of the coded way of saying there's a compensation offered, but in your purchase contract, and this was something we were never allowed to do before, we were never allowed to put seller to pay 3% commission to Keller Williams Capital Partners. That was always prohibited before. But now you can do it if, and I don't think it's in this part. Let me just finish reading this part first. As a practical matter, even though it cannot be called cooperative compensation, the amount of a seller's concession can match the amount the seller would offer as a cooperative compensation as part of the contract negotiations. So I don't know if that was confusing wording, but again, your property description can't say anything about commission, compensation to buyer broker, or anything like that. It can say the seller will offer a 3% concession. It can be a concession for closing costs, or it can just be a buyer concession. Once you negotiate your contract, though, it is allowed to say it's compensation to the buyer broker. But let me just say this real quick, and I gotta find it on here. Where is it on here? Somewhere on here it says it, but the big key, the big fine print for that section 2 is in order to ask for it in the contract, you have to have the buyer representation agreement signed, and the amount has to be at or below what you put in your buyer representation agreement. So in other words, if you're putting in a contract, seller to pay 3% commission to Keller Williams Capital Partners, you have to have a buyer representation agreement that says 3% or 4%. It has to be at or below that amount. So
it will be in writing.
Yes.
That they are going
Yes.
to offer
Yes.
3%.
it'll be right in
So
your
that
purchase
that
contract.
doesn't happen, right? Of that, we were talking about the sellers being savvy.
No, we're still talking about the buyer. We haven't gotten into the seller. It doesn't say anything about the seller changing what's on their contract.
Hang on a second, I'm trying to
Or that
find this
further
other
down.
language.
That's why I was wondering, sellers can offer concession.
No, when you offer consent, do you have to be definitive of, where that, how that concession is going? Like do
Are
you
we
have?
talking about in
In
a
the
property
MLS.
description?
Yes.
No, it can be very vague. in there.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure if I needed to be
You
definitive.
could say something like seller, offers 3%, buyer concession, or something very vague like that.
Okay,
Again, this may be tweaked over time, but based on what this says, that's what you would do.
okay.
Now, in the purchase contract, once you put it in there, it's gotta be specific, what's that being applied towards?
Okay.
Now, this is something that came up in the meeting last week. Can you just say, kind of a closing cost concession language? Can you say seller to pay 3% or whatever percent toward, buyer's closing costs and other fees, other buyer fees, something like that? With that language,
Yeah,
it
they open-
could, because you've got this contract signed with your buyer, this buyer broker agreement, it could apply towards that.
Yes. Now, let's go back to him.
Hold on
Yeah.
one second on this. I just want to make a note that I learned on concessions. If your buyer is using FHA or any government type of loan, there is a max of a 6% commission.
Yes.
So if you
Yes.
start doing
Yes.
commissions for buyer,
Mhm.
that's 3%, and let's say closing cost is 4%, you're gonna, that's 7 in total,
You're
that
gonna
will
max
run
out,
into a
yes.
problem.
Yeah, so always, this is something you'll be doing a lot going forward. Always confirm, you know, in addition to talking to the listing agent, you should also be always talking to the buyer's lender. You know, say, can we structure it this way? Because yes, as you said, different loan types do have, well, I think they're all gonna have some max on it, but some may be 3%, some may be 6.
Right.
We also found out in the meeting last week that a VA buyer
Cannot.
pay your commission. They cannot pay your commission.
Mm-mm.
So, you know, someone asked, well, should we not do the buyer broker agreement with a veteran buyer? Should we not put the percent in? Obviously, we already learned today, you gotta put the percent in.
Mhm.
Here's the workaround for that. When you, first meet with a buyer and you're having this buyer representation agreement signed, you don't know what kind of financing they're gonna get at that point. You might know they're a veteran.
Yeah.
That doesn't automatically mean they're going to use VA financing.
Right, right.
So you're still going to get that signed and you're gonna figure this part out later, so.
Now, I also, because I was really concerned about that, we had some people in our meeting that was concerned. If you are a listing agent, because it's not a protected class, let's say they don't want to pay commission for the buyer. But you can say, if it's a VA, would you do it? And then you can explain to them the reason why, and they may say, we will for the VA, for the veteran, we will pay the buyer's, commission for the veteran. So my question to you is, for listing agents, we will have a commission for us and a commission for the buyer's agent, possibly, right?
Right, whatever your listing agreement says,
Right,
yes.
so it has to be stated on there, because I was worried about what Doug said, then they can't do that, right? They can't say, well, if you bring me this much money, then we'll give you this much a percentage. They can't change that once that's signed.
It can still be renegotiated in a purchase contract. I guess, like, if, let's say you have a listing agreement with a seller and it's got a 6% commission.
Mhm,
And our Keller Williams Capital Partners, listing contracts
mhm,
actually say, you know, this much is going to be to the listing side to market the property. This much is going to go to the cooperating broker. It
mhm,
defines the percentages.
mhm.
So, you know, you've got a contract with the seller guaranteeing that.
Mhm.
So, I guess your question is, can the seller kind of go back on that and say, you know, I'll pay?
Because they're giving me, I don't know, Doug, is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, walking through that, because let's say it's our own company, okay? So they agree, we sign up the listing with a 2% for the listing side and a 3% for buyer side. And then during the contract negotiation, they decide on this 3% that it drops down to, let's say they only want to offer 1% because that buyer, they came in and they lowballed the property or whatever. So Keller Williams Capital Partners is not out anything because it was still at the 2% all along. They were never going to get any part of that 3%.
Right, right.
They
And
can-
they add a
they
contract,
can't change it though,
but who
because,
monitors it?
well, here's the thing. If they're calling in to find out, hey, how much is your buyer's thing, you email them, then you've given them the information that the buyer agent will get 3%. Also, that may fall into fair housing too.
Yeah,
If,
that's what I was.
But I,
thinking,
but
is-
I, as a
Protection.
listing, play through, if I'm a listing agent and you call me,
mhm,
I can say, submit your offer, the seller hasn't decided yet if they're gonna offer anything.
the
And
people-
assuming they've never published anything on a flyer that says
the
it's.
people, you're probably not gonna get agents who are gonna give you offers based off that. They wanna know if they're gonna get paid,
Yeah.
right? Like if I
You're not-
I was calling.
Then in theory, you're not following
No,
your
that-
ethics.
that's not true.
Because you're not, if your
That's-
buyer wants to buy.
No, well, it depends. It depends, because when you talk to your buyer, you can tell them, this is what you would have to pay me, right, 3%. I can show you, do you want me to show you homes that will pay us, or if they won't pay us, do we show you? Cause you have to work that out, right?
Yes,
So if my buyer says, I can pay you 3%, then I'm not gonna go show them a house like that.
Right.
Because then I mess myself up as a listing agent, because now they fell in love with this house.
yeah, that would be the downside
Yeah.
of doing something where you didn't offer,
Right.
you weren't transparent up front of
Right,
the situation. Now, could you play this out outside, like if you come across a seller who's going to, no commission, could you instruct your buyer to, okay, it's a list price, not in a multiple offer situation where we just go up the 3% on the price
Mhm.
and then build it back into, they'll
Mhm.
pay it.
Mhm.
So net to the seller, it's no different.
Mhm.
And
So this is one of those scenarios, and there's a whole bunch of these scenarios out there that we don't have the answers yet. So they're certainly valid questions, very valid, because these are scenarios that will come up for sure. But I don't want to guess at the answer. I don't want to, again, try to work out something at this table because it's not going to matter if the
it was
rules
worth
change.
saying, no, you can't do
right,
it.
you can't do it anyway.
Waste a
so
lot of
don't.
time.
I'd be happy to sit with you guys and like play these out and try to work them out, but that's kind of the rabbit hole we got into in the meeting last week.
Yeah,
Well, all these agents are throwing these scenarios out. They were all very valid questions,
Mhm.
but no one in that room and no one in this room has the answers.
right.
So we're just gonna have to unfortunately table those, and that's why it's really, really, really important. Like, this is not the end of this discussion. This is the beginning of this
Yeah.
discussion. So there are going to be many new policies and both federally and locally and with our board of realtors that are going to help us through these scenarios.
So,
So I'm confident that by July 15th or whatever the deadline for this actually is, we are going to be provided with the answers to all these questions.
sure.
So let's not get too hung up
Right.
on these scenarios for now, just because we do not know the answer.
Right.
Give a lot of buyers and sellers in contract.
But
Houses sold
take
before July.
comfort in knowing that every other agent
I'm just
and every other
saying.
company across the country is having the same
Sure. No,
internal struggles with this.
absolutely. And too, honestly, like ethically, how do we want to be, right? For like how, because we can also leave that and say, we're not going to change compensation.
Mhm.
Because what's gonna happen, if you do it to a buyer, it's gonna happen to you.
Yeah,
And we cannot go down that road. I mean,
Absolutely.
so this,
Yeah.
they would have the signed contract where they said 3% up front.
Right, yeah.
And then they changed their mind.
Yeah,
I get that.
no
But
one is bad with their
But
house.
how,
they
how,
tell them.
but how do you prove that? How does the buyer know?
Well, you tell them, that's
They-
why that
But what-
listing but.
Yeah, but they don't ask for proof.
That's
You-
just where I'm upset
But
about.
anyway.
Yeah.
Really got upset about it.
Yeah.
Like, I can navigate.
Well,
So
this.
that, see, that's
We're
gonna
gonna talk about that in a while too.
It'll come back.
All right, so guys, I wanna, get through this because, I actually have another appointment after this, so, and you know what, Jasmine, I forgot to talk to Sam. Sam, are you free after this meeting?
Mhm.
Could you go over, a couple things with Jasmine?
Yeah.
Just kind of wanted to see like what you do for the group and, I think that's,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, Jasmine, I totally forgot to ask.
Oh, it's okay. No, you're
All right, so, number 3, so again, for you guys on Zoom, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but number 3 says, offers of cooperative compensation may be made off the MLS. So I think maybe this, Marcia, is where you're going to see some of these, I think, because it's basically saying, in addition to, giving you this information by phone or by email or whatever, it literally says, that, I could have a website
Yes.
that's not connected in any way to the MLS where I post the compensation on my listings. So
Can I
maybe
say
that's
something?
what we use.
The Keller Williams website.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so,
Rick,
uh,
I honestly was thinking about this and showing time. You could do it through showing
no,
time.
we covered that, ENC showing time, is not gonna be an option because it's connected to the MLS.
Well, what the heck?
So, yeah, so the only site that it can be on is one that's not affiliated with or connected with the MLS.
It's Keller
Oh
Williams.
my goodness, they're ruining my game. I don't understand.
So obviously, like, yes, every real estate company's website does have a MLS feed, the IDX
Right.
feed.
Oh, so then we can't do it, we have to do it on.
But it depends
But
on
I
the
don't know-
definition of
But I
connect.
don't, yeah, I don't know if
There's
that
a
counts or not.
business.
Yeah,
There's
because I mean,
a
individual
relationship, but
agent
it's not
websites, like our individual agent websites are also connected.
Connected, yeah.
But not connected in the, that's a good question. I guess it kind of
not
depends
in
on
the
what
business
connected
side.
really means.
We'll get the
Yeah.
answer of this
Yes.
to be determined.
BBB.
Ah,
All right,
lots of
so,
those.
but it sounds like, websites, if they're not connected, whatever connected means, can be a source for the information.
Someone's gonna create one, just know that.
Yeah, and then you could also put it on your personal Facebook
Yes,
page.
Yeah,
yes.
On your work page, you can put it on there.
Facebook
And that's
groups.
where Lori Molnar, whatever, if you post it or you do whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you can't
Do it
change
by the
it,
board,
but
Yeah.
you can't change that commission down the road.
Yeah.
If it's published out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put it on your sign, on
You put it on your sign.
your listing,
Yeah.
3% offer at the top.
Yeah, so that's number 4 on here. Brokers can publish offers of cooperative compensation for their own listings on their own websites.
Okay,
But then it doesn't really elaborate on, the whole connected to the MLS thing. I'm thinking, and again, this is just me thinking, don't think this is carved in stone, but I don't think just having an MLS feed to your website means that you're connected or associated with
Right,
the MLS.
because the KWLS is what you know what I'm talking about
Yeah.
on command.
Yeah,
That's what I think it connects to on the KW website, so I don't know how they get all those
Mhm.
listings, if they own, like, they have partners with all the MLSs or what.
I mean, every brokerage website is connected to an MLS feed, so
Mhm.
I feel like that's still exempt.
KW
having
just
the
has
feed.
every list, MLS.
Well, yeah, so
Under there.
yeah, even our agent sites are connected to the MLS, so you can see listings that aren't our listings on there. You can search the whole MLS.
And then,
You can search the whole country.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think
So the last one on here, number 5, agents must make commission disclosures. So we're already covered on this that says
Mhm.
agents must disclose in listing agreements, buyer representation agreements, and pre-closing disclosures that buyer commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable.
Mhm.
So, our Keller Williams Capital Partners exclusive right to sell listing agreement was already revised, I think, last month or 2 months ago, and it includes that exact language. So we're, again, ahead of the curve on that. Obviously, that's already in the buyer representation agreement as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we're covered on that stuff. So that's kind of a non-issue, so. All right, guys, so hopefully this answered a few questions. I know there's a lot of unanswered questions, and unfortunately, I don't like leaving things open-ended, but
that's
That's-
the topic for you.
that's.
There's a lot of good, just plug for Keller Williams. I've listened partially to one of them, but they're doing those open house kind of conversations on there. To take a listen to those, as
Yeah,
those guys talk about.
Right.
that's
different
my,
areas.
that's my parting advice to you guys today is you need to stay on top of this because the agents who are going to struggle, like, in our meeting last week, you were there for this part, Josh literally started out by saying, some of you will not be here. Well, maybe that was after.
No.
That was after. You
No.
heard
at
that.
the beginning.
I thought-
No,
I
it
thought-
started
I
out.
thought-
He started the motivation.
I thought-
Motivation
I
skill.
thought, damn, Josh, that's pretty hard.
So all the people on the mother's chat are talking.
The body language and the voice.
But here's the thing, guys, here's the thing, he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
He's right, he's
So-
right.
You guys have the choice. Are you gonna be here a year from now or not? And if you stay on top of this and you don't freak out about this and you adapt to the changes, you're gonna be just fine.
Well, I don't know what changes there are, so I'm just going.
Yeah,
with
so you're
it.
new, so, you know,
Thank goodness,
Yeah,
I hear everybody else who has done this,
yeah.
and I'm like,
No, it should be easy
Oh,
for you.
absolutely.
For
I
you,
don't even
because
know.
you're getting on the ground floor.
I don't know what they're
You
talking
know,
about.
if I can say one thing.
Hi, Julie.
or- And you've said this many times, there are changes all the time in this industry. You have to make a decision. Either I'm gonna roll with it
And
Yeah.
Our world is fear,
Yes.
Driven.
Driven, yes.
right?
You're
So
right.
Yes.
like either you roll with it or you don't, but that's, I mean, when we went to Hondros, I'm assuming you went to Hondros.
Yeah,
Right? What did they tell us? They said, oh, half of you are gonna be gone by the
Yes.
end of it, you know, just let those fees come in and hit you in
yeah,
the mouth.
yeah.
So, I mean,
That was that hand kept coming out like, here, more.
Julie, did you forget about the time difference?
There's no time difference.
Yeah, there is now because of daylight savings, because they don't.
No,
have-
I didn't forget.
Huh?
I'm here.
I know, but we're done. We're ending. Yeah, remember there's an hour difference now because of daylight savings.
Nancy said, listen, Julie, don't be pointing the camera towards the beach.
Specifically requested
I love
beach
her.
backdrop. And unlike everyone else's fake beach Zoom
Are you
backdrop.
Look, me turn her.
Okay, so going forward, it's 9 o'clock my time. What
Blurred.
time is the meeting there?
It's 11:01 there, here now.
See, and I had it in my head. that-
Wait,
Okay.
I can't see the beach behind you.
Here, I'll give you a show.
There you go.
Well, you got it blurred.
Maybe your
Oh,
camera.
hold on.
You got it blurred. No, she's
Solid
got
salt
it
water.
set, or the blur, so the background's blur and all you can see is her,
Yeah,
so you don't,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That's what I
Can you
did.
see it?
I know, I think it's gonna be my head.
Like,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Probably in your Zoom settings. Julie.
everything that's in behind
Yeah, I
you.
can't fix it.
I don't want any.
No,
to see
you
the
can't
mess
do it,
behind
she
me.
has to do it.
But she's got a gorgeous background, so she didn't have to worry about that blur.
And Craig said thank you everyone for coming last night.
Oh, thanks, Craig,
He's
for
gone.
having.
He signed off.
Yeah, he signed off.
That house was beautiful, and it was
Yeah.
great for pictures.
Nancy, you also have a check here at the office.
Ernest check?
Yeah, or the mutual release thing.
Yeah, she's gonna go today to pick it up. Is it downstairs?
I have it upstairs, but I can.
I'm not.
Yeah, can you leave it at the office downstairs? She's
I
gonna
can
stop
drop
by
it down
today and
when I
pick it up.
No, maybe when I'm-
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're
Okay.
gonna wrap up.
For you, that's-
But yeah, just stay on top of this. Don't freak out. There's going to be a lot more information coming out between now and July and probably even well after that as well, once we, have all these things in place. So stay on top of it. You guys are all gonna be fine.
Thank you. I have one question. Oh, Julie, Julie,
Yeah,
Julie,
yeah.
how dare you? How dare you?
Hey, Sam, you can probably stop our recording now.
What do you mean?